My name is Rhett Blackwell, 32 years old. I still remember that reunion dinner last summer. My Aunt Eleanor, swirling her wine glass, looked at me with that familiar, condescending smile. Poor boy. Still a secretary at some tech company? She mocked. If only they knew about my secret empire worth millions. Fate has a sense of humor, though. The very next day, their $100 million acquisition needed the CEO's signature. Their faces when they saw me at the head of the table? Priceless. Before I tell you how it all unfolded, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like and subscribe button if you have ever been underestimated and proved someone wrong. I grew up in a family where business success was the only measure of worth. The Blackwell name carried weight in corporate America, a legacy built by generations before us. My father, Richard Blackwell, was the embodiment of that legacy as the CEO of Blackwell Enterprises, a manufacturing conglomerate that had expanded into various industries over the decades. He ran the company with an iron fist, expecting nothing but excellence and absolute loyalty. From an early age, it was clear that my older brother Brian was being groomed to take over the family business. 5 years my senior, Brian had the confident swagger that my father admired. He was taken to board meetings from the age of 15, while I was told to focus on my studies. Brian was given tours of the factories, introduced to business partners, and included in discussions about company strategy. Meanwhile, I was the afterthought, the spare heir who existed in the shadows of my brother's projected greatness. Brian has the Blackwell business instinct, my father would often say at our dinner table. He understands what it takes to lead. The implication was always clear. I lacked whatever special quality my brother possessed. My mother, Catherine, a former marketing executive who had given up her career to support my father, would sit silently during these pronouncements. Occasionally, she would squeeze my hand under the table, but never once did she contradict my father's assessment. Family dinners were battlegrounds disguised as casual gatherings. I would sometimes venture to share an idea about business trends or technology innovations, only to be cut off mid-sentence. That's not how things work in the real world, Rhett, my father would say dismissively. You're thinking too small, too idealistic. Brian would usually chime in with a correction to my thinking, earning an approving nod from our father. By the time I was 16, I had learned to stay quiet during these dinners, speaking only when spoken to. My Aunt Eleanor, my father's sister and a senior vice president at Blackwell Enterprises, was perhaps even more critical than my father. She had never married or had children, dedicating her life to the family business. She viewed me as a disappointment to the Blackwell name. Not everyone is cut out for business leadership, she would tell me, as if offering comfort. Perhaps you should consider something in the arts or teaching. Something more suitable for your temperament. Despite the constant undermining, I excelled academically. I was accepted into Harvard Business School, graduating with honors at the top of my class. I expected at least some acknowledgement of this achievement, but my graduation dinner quickly turned into a celebration of Brian's recent acquisition deal for the company. Harvard Business School is impressive on paper, my father said when I finally received a cursory congratulations. But real business acumen comes from experience, not textbooks. Brian was already closing million-dollar deals at your age. When I was offered a management position at Blackwell Enterprises after graduation, it came with conditions. I would start in a lower position than external hires with similar qualifications, reporting to one of Brian's deputies. The message was clear. I needed to prove myself in ways others didn't, and my path would always be in my brother's shadow. You should be grateful, Aunt Eleanor told me when I expressed hesitation about the offer. Most people would kill for an opportunity at Blackwell. Your cousins all had to start in the mailroom. The breaking point came during a family strategy retreat at our summer home in the Hamptons. I had prepared a detailed presentation about emerging technologies and how Blackwell Enterprises could pivot to include cybersecurity solutions for our manufacturing clients. I had spent weeks researching the market opportunity, potential acquisition targets, and implementation strategies. 5 minutes into my presentation, my father interrupted. This is precisely why you're not ready for real responsibility, Rhett. You don't have the business gene like your brother. Cybersecurity? That's not our core business. We stick to what we know. Brian smirked from across the table. Maybe in a few years, when you understand our business model better, we can revisit some of these creative ideas. That night, I made my decision. I would forge my own path, away from my family's shadow and constant comparison. The next morning, I declined the position at Blackwell Enterprises, much to my family's outrage. "You're throwing away your birthright," my father thundered. "Generations of Blackwells have built this company, and you're too proud to start at the bottom like everyone else." "It's not about pride," I tried to explain. "It's about finding my own way." "Your own way?" Aunt Eleanor scoffed. "You'll come crawling back when you realize how the real world works. Not everyone gets handed opportunities on a silver platter." I packed my bags that same day, moving out of the family mansion and into a small apartment downtown. The final words my father spoke to me before I left still rang in my ears. "When you fail, and you will fail, don't expect the Blackwell name to open doors for you. You've chosen to be on your own." Little did they know, those words would become the fuel that drove me to prove them wrong in ways they couldn't imagine. The first few months on my own were humbling. Despite my Harvard degree, I deliberately avoided using the Blackwell name or connections. I wanted to succeed or fail on my own merits. I found a job as a systems analyst at Cybertech, a small but reputable software company specializing in basic security solutions. The position was several levels below what my qualifications warranted, but it gave me exactly what I needed: an insider's view of the cybersecurity industry. Cybertech catered primarily to large corporations with substantial IT budgets. During client meetings, I noticed a pattern. Mid-sized businesses were being overlooked. They were too small to afford enterprise-level security solutions, but too large to rely on off-the-shelf consumer products. This gap in the market became increasingly obvious the more clients I interacted with. "We can't justify the expense," one business owner told me after a pitch meeting. "But we know we're vulnerable. We just need something tailored to our scale." I began working late nights in my cramped studio apartment, sketching out business plans for a company that would bridge this gap. I envisioned affordable, scalable security solutions designed specifically for mid-market businesses. By day, I was learning the technical aspects of cybersecurity at Cybertech. By night, I was building the foundation for my own venture. My apartment transformed into a makeshift office. The kitchen table became my desk, covered with market research printouts and financial projections. My refrigerator contained little more than energy drinks and takeout leftovers. Sleep became a luxury as I poured every spare moment into my vision. 6 months into this double life, I attended a technology conference representing Cybertech. During a networking session, I found myself in conversation with Rhett, a former Cybertech executive who had left to become an angel investor. "You seem to have insights beyond your role," Marcus commented after I shared some observations about market trends. "What would you do differently if you were running the show?" Over coffee that stretched into dinner, I cautiously shared my vision for targeted cybersecurity solutions for mid-market companies. I outlined the gap in the market, my proposed technical approach, and preliminary financial projections. By dessert, Marcus was leaning forward, fully engaged. "Why aren't you doing this yourself?" he asked directly. "Capital," I admitted, "and I'm still learning the industry." Marcus studied me for a moment. "I think you know more than you realize. As for capital, what would you do with $500,000? 2 weeks later, I was staring at a signed investment agreement. Marcus had offered $500,000 in seed funding for 20% equity in my yet-to-be-formed company. The deal came with one condition. He would serve as an advisor, but remain hands-off on daily operations. I had complete operational control. I made a critical decision then. My family would not know about this venture. The Blackwell name would be nowhere near the company. I had seen how my father operated, how he could crush competition or absorb promising startups. More than that, I couldn't bear the thought of their dismissal and criticism as I built something from scratch. SecureNova Inc. was registered with me, listed simply as R.B. Walker, using my middle name and my mother's maiden name. I rented a small office space in an unremarkable building downtown, far from the prestigious financial district where Blackwell Enterprises towered over the city. Finding my first employees was challenging. I needed talent, but couldn't compete with Silicon Valley salaries. I focused on finding people like me, underestimated, overlooked, but brilliantly capable. Jordan, a network security specialist, passed over for promotion at his previous company due to lacking an Ivy League education. Layla, a coding prodigy, who had dropped out of college to care for her ailing mother. And Daniel, a former military intelligence officer, transitioning to civilian life. We're small now, I told them during our first team meeting in our modest office with second-hand furniture. But we're building something that will change the industry. The first year was brutal. Finding clients willing to trust their security to an unknown startup proved nearly impossible. We pivoted to offering free security assessments to small businesses, using those relationships to build case studies and referrals. I stopped taking a salary after 3 months, pouring every dollar back into the company. My lifestyle became increasingly austere. I moved to an even smaller apartment to cut expenses. I sold my car and used public transportation. When friends from Harvard or former colleagues invited me to dinners or events, I invented excuses. Every dollar mattered, and appearances had to wait. The breakthrough came 18 months in, when a mid-sized healthcare provider suffered a ransomware attack. Their established security provider had failed them, and in desperation, they called us based on a recommendation from one of our free assessment clients. Within 48 hours, our team had contained the breach, recovered their data without paying the ransom, and implemented our security protocol. The healthcare company signed a 3-year contract the following week. Their CEO became our most vocal advocate, referring 3 new clients within a month. SecureNova had finally found its footing. We reached break-even point by the end of our 2nd year, a milestone that I celebrated alone in my apartment with a single glass of whiskey. All the while, my family believed I was still working as a mid-level IT specialist. During rare phone calls with my mother, I deflected questions about my career. At the occasional family event I couldn't avoid, I spoke vaguely about working in tech and quickly changed the subject. Aunt Eleanor never failed to comment on my modest lifestyle and how it reflected my lack of ambition. If they only knew I was now the CEO of a company that was about to change the cybersecurity landscape forever. 2 years into operations, SecureNova had transformed from a struggling startup into a rapidly growing enterprise. Our team had expanded from the original 3 employees to 50 talented professionals spread across development, sales, and customer support. Our client list had grown to include over 200 mid-sized businesses across healthcare, finance, and manufacturing sectors. The game changer was our flagship product, Nova Shield. Unlike traditional security solutions that required expensive hardware and constant updates, Nova Shield was a cloud-based platform that scaled according to client needs. It offered enterprise-level protection at a fraction of the cost of our competitors. The market response was overwhelmingly positive. This is exactly what we've been looking for. The CIO of a regional bank told me after implementing our system. The big security firms treated us like we were too small to matter, but you built something that fits us perfectly. With our growing success came the need for expansion. I opened additional offices in Chicago and Austin, strategically positioning us to serve clients across the country. We also began exploring international markets, starting with Canada and the UK, where regulatory environments were similar. Our rapid growth didn't go unnoticed by the industry giants. CyberGuard, one of the largest security firms in the country, began aggressively targeting our client base with steep discounts and exclusive contracts. They saw our disruptive model as a threat to their established business. Instead of engaging in a price war we couldn't win, I doubled down on innovation and customer service. We introduced a 24-hour response guarantee that larger firms couldn't match due to their bureaucratic structures. We personalized our service with dedicated security advisors for each client. When clients compared our responsive, tailored approach to the one-size-fits-all solutions from the giants, we consistently won. At a cybersecurity conference in San Francisco, I encountered Jessica Chen, the former head of B2B marketing at Google. She was delivering a keynote on building trust in digital security when I was struck by her vision for transparent, relationship-based marketing in the tech industry. After her talk, I approached her with a proposition. Your approach to marketing aligns perfectly with what we're building at SecureNova, I told her. We're changing how mid-market companies approach security. But we need someone who can communicate that vision effectively." Jessica was intrigued but hesitant. "I've had offers from several established firms," she admitted. "Why should I join a company I've barely heard of?" Instead of a traditional pitch, I invited her to meet our team and clients. Over the next week, she spoke with developers who shared their innovative approaches and clients who enthusiastically endorsed our impact on their businesses. By the end of the week, she accepted the position of Chief Marketing Officer. Jessica's impact was immediate and profound. She revamped our brand identity, crafted a compelling narrative around our mission, and secured strategic partnerships that amplified our visibility. Our client acquisition rate doubled within 6 months of her joining. Our working relationship evolved into something more personal. Late nights strategizing marketing campaigns turned into dinner conversations about our backgrounds and aspirations. Jessica was brilliant, driven, and shared my vision for building something meaningful rather than just profitable. For the first time since starting SecureNova, I found someone I could be completely honest with about my family background and the real motivation behind my company. "You're building this to prove them wrong," she observed one night over dinner at her apartment. "That's how it started," I admitted. "But now it's about proving myself right. This company is what I was meant to build." The breakthrough moment for SecureNova came when we secured a Series B funding round that valued the company at $75 million. The investment would fuel our expansion into new markets and accelerate product development. Marcus, my original investor, called it the best investment decision of my career. Despite this success, I maintained a deliberately modest personal lifestyle. I still drove my 7-year-old Toyota and lived in an apartment that, while comfortable, was far from luxurious. My family continued to believe I was simply an IT under at a tech company, a perception I didn't correct during our infrequent interactions. The irony wasn't lost on me when Forbes magazine included me in their 30 under 30 list for enterprise technology. I appeared under R.B. Walker, with a professionally taken photo where I wore glasses I didn't actually need and styled my hair differently than usual. The precaution seemed excessive, but I wasn't ready for my family to discover the truth through a magazine article. "You could buy a building in Manhattan with your equity," Jessica pointed out one evening as we walked past a real estate office. "Yet you're still living like a graduate student. Aren't you tempted to enjoy some of your success?" "The company comes first," I replied. "Besides, there's something satisfying about building all this, while my family still thinks I'm just getting by." Jessica understood my reasons but gently challenged my perspective. "At some point, you'll need to decide if you're building this life for yourself or still trying to prove something to your family." Her words stayed with me, making me question whether I was truly free of my family's influence, if I was still shaping my life in reaction to them. But before I could fully explore that thought, an invitation arrived that would set in motion the most satisfying confrontation of my life. The gilded invitation arrived unexpectedly at my apartment, the embossed Blackwell family crest gleaming under the light. "Annual Blackwell Family Reunion," it announced in elegant script, to be held at my parents' sprawling Hampton estate. I had skipped the previous 2 years' events, citing work commitments. But something told me this year should be different. "Are you actually considering going?" Jessica asked when I showed her the invitation. "From everything you've told me about these gatherings, they sound like exercises in psychological warfare. Maybe it's time to make an appearance," I replied, studying the invitation. SecureNova is stable now, and honestly, I'm curious about what they're up to. The Blackwell estate loomed like a modern castle as we drove up the long tree-lined driveway. The 6-bedroom colonial mansion with its manicured lawns and Olympic-sized pool had once been my childhood home, though it never really felt like one. Now it felt like visiting a museum dedicated to old money and corporate success. My mother Catherine greeted us at the door, her face lighting up with genuine warmth despite the tension of the past few years. "Rhett, I'm so glad you came," she said, embracing me before turning curiously to Jessica. "This is Jessica Chen. I hesitated for a microsecond, girlfriend. It was the first time we'd officially used that label, and Jessica's subtle smile told me she approved. "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Blackwell," Jessica said with professional poise. "Your home is beautiful." "Thank you, dear. And please, call me Catherine," my mother replied, clearly pleased that I had brought someone to the event. Everyone is out by the pool. Your father will be glad you're here." That seemed unlikely, but I nodded politely as we followed her through the house. The rear garden had been transformed into a sophisticated outdoor reception area. About 30 family members and close business associates mingled around the pool and patio, champagne flutes in hand, engaged in what appeared to be a mixture of casual conversation and business networking. My father, Richard, stood at the center of a small group, commanding attention as always in his tailored suit despite the casual setting. He noticed us immediately, his expression shifting from surprise to a carefully composed neutrality as he excused himself from his conversation. "Rhett," he said, offering a firm handshake rather than an embrace. "We weren't sure you'd make it." He turned to Jessica with a practiced smile. "And who might this be?" After introductions, my father quickly steered the conversation toward Brian's recent achievements. "Your brother just closed the Peterson deal. $300 million in new manufacturing contracts for Blackwell Enterprises. Congratulations," I said to Brian, who had appeared at my father's side with a proprietary grin. "That's impressive work. Just doing what needs to be done for the family business," Brian replied, emphasizing the word family slightly. "How's life in the tech support world? Still helping people reset their passwords?" Before I could respond, Aunt Eleanor joined our circle, martini in hand and critical eye, already assessing Jessica from head to toe. "Rhett, what a surprise. We thought you'd forgotten about your family entirely." "Just busy with work, Aunt Eleanor," I replied evenly. "Yes, I imagine IT support keeps you quite occupied," she said dismissively before turning to Jessica. "And you work in this tech support company as well?" Jessica smiled graciously. "Actually, I'm the chief marketing officer at my company. We previously worked together at different organizations." Eleanor's eyebrows raised slightly. "A marketing executive? How impressive." Her tone suggested the opposite. "And yet you're dating my nephew, the computer technician. How fascinating." I felt Jessica tense beside me, but she maintained her composure. Brian, sensing potential drama, steered the conversation toward business again. "Father and I are finalizing details on our biggest acquisition yet," he announced proudly. "We're expanding into the cybersecurity sector. There's a tech company with some promising security solutions that would complement our manufacturing clients' needs." My interest was immediately piqued. "Which company?" "Secretive," Brian replied casually. "Not that you would have heard of it. They're a significant player in the enterprise security space, but they're looking for a buyer with deeper pockets to help them scale. We're offering $100 million. I kept my face neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in my head. Secretive was one of SecureNova's technology partners. They provided specialized hardware components that integrated with our software solutions. If Blackwell Enterprises acquired them, it could potentially disrupt our supply chain. "That's an interesting move," I commented carefully. "Cybersecurity is quite different from your traditional manufacturing base. Diversification is key in today's market." My father interjected. "Something you might understand if you had stayed with the family business." Aunt Eleanor, who had been watching this exchange with evident amusement, couldn't resist adding her own barb. "Poor boy. Still a secretary? At some tech company?" "Jessica, did you know Rhett turned down a management position at Blackwell Enterprises? He could have been on the executive track by now. Instead of fixing computers." I felt Jessica bristle beside me, but I squeezed her hand gently. "This wasn't the time or place for confrontation. I'm quite content with my career choices, Aunt Eleanor," I replied calmly. "Content with mediocrity," she scoffed. "A true Blackwell would aim higher." My mother, sensing the growing tension, attempted to change the subject. "Jessica, tell us about your background." Rhett rarely shares details about his life these days. As Jessica engaged my mother in conversation, Brian pulled me aside with an unexpected confidentiality. "The Secretive deal is crucial for us," he admitted. "Their security protocols would give us a competitive edge in manufacturing automation. The final signing is tomorrow at their headquarters." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, genuinely curious. Brian shrugged. "Despite everything, you're still my brother, and you work in tech. Thought you might find it interesting." He hesitated, then added, "Father still talks about you, you know." Wonders if you'll ever come back to Blackwell. To start at the bottom and work my way up under your supervision? I asked with a raised eyebrow. That was years ago, Brian replied. Things change. As the evening progressed, I overheard more details about the Tech-Defend acquisition. The signing ceremony was scheduled for noon the following day. The executive team from Blackwell Enterprises, including my father, Brian, and Aunt Eleanor, would be attending. They seemed confident the deal was all but finalized. What they didn't know was that Tech-Defend's security protocol integration with SecureNova required my signature on any acquisition deals. As CEO of one of their primary technology partners, I had insisted on this clause in our contract to prevent exactly this type of situation. As Jessica and I drove back to the city that night, I finally allowed myself a small smile. You've been unusually quiet, Jessica noted. What's going on in that mind of yours? I think it's finally time the Blackwell family learns what their mediocre son has been up to these past few years, I replied. And tomorrow is going to be quite interesting. My phone rang at 6:30 the next morning. I was already awake, reviewing documents in preparation for what would likely be the most satisfying business meeting of my career. Mr. Walker? This is Patricia Reynolds, Vice President of Operations at Tech-Defend, said the voice on the other end. I apologize for calling so early, but we have an urgent situation regarding the Blackwell acquisition. Good morning, Patricia, I replied, maintaining my calm despite the adrenaline already coursing through my veins. What seems to be the problem? As per our partnership agreement, we need your signature as CEO of SecureNova before finalizing the acquisition. The Blackwell team is pushing to complete the deal today at noon. They've made it clear that any delays could jeopardize the offer. I understand, I said. Where is the meeting taking place? That's just it, Patricia continued, sounding slightly embarrassed. The Blackwell team insisted on holding the signing at their headquarters downtown, but given our partnership agreements, I suggested we meet at SecureNova instead, since we'll need your signature anyway. I hope that wasn't overstepping. I couldn't have planned it better myself. Not at all, Patricia. SecureNova headquarters at noon works perfectly. I'll make sure everything is prepared on our end. After ending the call, I turned to find Jessica watching me from the bedroom doorway, coffee mug in hand, and an amused expression on her face. From that half of the conversation, I'm guessing today's the day, she asked. Today's the day, I confirmed, unable to suppress a smile. The Blackwell family is coming to SecureNova headquarters to sign their precious acquisition deal. They have no idea they'll need my signature to complete it. Jessica crossed the room and set her coffee down, placing her hands on my shoulders. Are you sure you're ready for this? Once they know who you really are, there's no going back. I covered her hands with mine. I've been building toward this moment for 5 years. It's time they saw what I've created without their name or their money. 2 hours later, I stood in my office on the 30th floor of the SecureNova Tower, a gleaming glass and steel structure in the heart of the financial district. I had purchased the building just 6 months earlier when our explosive growth demanded more space. The irony wasn't lost on me that our headquarters now stood taller than the Blackwell Enterprises building just 3 blocks away. For this special occasion, I had abandoned my usual casual work attire of jeans and button-down shirts. Instead, I wore a custom-tailored Tom Ford suit that Jessica had insisted I purchase for important meetings. Today certainly qualified. The conference room is ready, sir, my executive assistant Michael informed me. The catering has been arranged, and security has been briefed about our special guests. Thank you, Michael. And the documentation? All prepared according to Miss Chen's specifications. The marketing presentation is loaded on the main screen, and the legal team has reviewed all the contract addendums. I nodded, satisfied with the preparations. Let's proceed as planned then. The SecureNova executive boardroom occupied half of the top floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city skyline. The long mahogany table could seat 20, though today only 8 chairs were arranged around it. At the head of the table, a single high-backed leather chair awaited me. At 11:45, Michael's voice came through on the intercom. Sir, the Tech-Defend representatives have arrived. They're being escorted up now. Show them in when they arrive, I instructed, positioning myself at the window with my back to the door, gazing out at the city below. Patricia Reynolds entered first, accompanied by Tech-Defend's CEO James Morrison and their legal counsel. They greeted me warmly. unaware of the drama about to unfold. The Blackwell team just arrived in the lobby, Patricia informed me. They should be up momentarily. I nodded, maintaining my position at the window. Perfect. Let's have them shown in as soon as they arrive. 5 minutes later, I heard the conference room door open again, followed by the sound of multiple footsteps and my assistant's professional voice. Mr. Blackwell, Mr. Blackwell Jr., Miss Blackwell, and Mr. Peterson. Welcome to SecureNova. Please take your seats. The CEO will be with you momentarily. I allowed the silence to linger for a few seconds, imagining their confusion at being welcomed to a company they'd never heard of for what they believed was a straightforward acquisition meeting with TechDefend. Then, with deliberate slowness, I turned from the window to face my family. The expressions that greeted me were exactly as I had imagined during countless sleepless nights over the past 5 years. My father, the ever-composed Richard Blackwell, stood frozen, his face draining of color. Brian's mouth hung open in undisguised shock. Aunt Eleanor clutched the back of a chair for support, looking as though she'd seen a ghost. Their lawyer, Mr. Peterson, merely looked confused, glancing between me and my family members with growing concern. "Good afternoon," I said calmly, walking to the head of the table. "Welcome to SecureNova. I'm Rhett Blackwell, CEO and founder. I believe we have a business matter to discuss." My father was the first to recover, his surprise quickly hardening into something between anger and disbelief. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, looking from me to the TechDefend executives. James Morrison from TechDefend cleared his throat uncomfortably. As I mentioned during our preliminary discussions, any acquisition would require approval from our key technology partners. SecureNova is our most significant partner in the cybersecurity space, and you neglected to mention that this partner was headed by my son? My father asked, his voice dangerously controlled. "To be fair, Mr. Blackwell," Patricia interjected, "we were unaware of your relationship. Mr. Walker, as we know him, has always conducted business under that name." Aunt Eleanor's shock had transformed into a calculating stare. "Walker, your mother's maiden name. How long have you been hiding behind this facade, Rhett? Please, take your seats," I said, gesturing to the chairs. "We have a significant business transaction to discuss, and I believe time is of the essence." Brian was the first to sit, seemingly torn between admiration and jealousy. "You built all this? SecureNova is your company?" "From the ground up," I confirmed, taking my seat at the head of the table. "Now, shall we discuss the terms of your proposed acquisition of TechDefend?" The tension in the boardroom was thick enough to cut with a knife. My father took his seat last, his face a mask of controlled emotion. The TechDefend executives exchanged nervous glances, clearly sensing they had walked into a family drama far beyond their expectations. "Perhaps we should begin with a brief presentation about SecureNova," I suggested, activating the large screen behind me. It might provide some helpful context for our discussion. The screen came to life with our company profile. Founded 5 years ago, current valuation of $180 million, over 300 employees across 4 offices nationally and 2 internationally, serving more than 500 clients. SecureNova specializes in cybersecurity solutions for mid-market businesses, I explained professionally, as if giving a standard investor presentation. We identified a significant gap in the market between enterprise-level security providers and consumer-grade protection. Our flagship product, Nova Shield, has captured 32% market share in our target segment within just 3 years of launch. I clicked to the next slide, showing our impressive growth trajectory. We've maintained 80% year-over-year growth for the past 3 years, with profit margins exceeding industry standards by 17%. My father leaned forward, his business instincts temporarily overriding his personal shock. "And you built this without any Blackwell resources or connections?" "I built this despite the Blackwell name, not because of it," I replied evenly. "My initial seed funding came from an angel investor who believed in my vision when my own family did not." Aunt Eleanor's lips thinned into a tight line. "And now you've orchestrated this ambush. To what end exactly? To humiliate us?" "This is not an ambush, Aunt Eleanor. This is business. I turned to the TechDefend executives. SecureNova and TechDefend have been technology partners for 3 years. Our integration protocols are deeply embedded in each other's systems. As our contract stipulates, any acquisition of TechDefend requires SecureNova's approval and signature. James Morrison nodded in confirmation. That is correct. The partnership has been mutually beneficial, and the integration is a key value proposition for both companies. I returned my attention to my family. So here we are. Blackwell Enterprises wants to acquire TechDefend. SecureNova needs to approve the deal. Shall we discuss terms? My father had recovered his composure, his business acumen taking over. What are your terms, Rhett? First, let's review the current acquisition offer, I said, nodding to Michael, who distributed folders containing the relevant documents. $100 million for TechDefend, with the current management team staying in place for a minimum of 2 years. Blackwell Enterprises would absorb the company as a wholly owned subsidiary, focused on providing security solutions to your manufacturing clients. I paused, allowing them time to review the materials. The acquisition makes strategic sense. However, there are concerns about integration with existing SecureNova systems and protocols. Brian, ever the pragmatist, spoke up. What would you propose instead? Calm. There's an Sterolier, ever the pragmatist. There's an Hill. There's an Harrius. One hum. 1.com. One hum. One hum. One hum. A 3-way partnership, I replied promptly. Blackwell acquires 70% of TechDefend instead of 100%. SecureNova maintains a 20% stake to ensure technological compatibility and continued innovation. The remaining 10% stays with TechDefend's founding team for continued motivation. The TechDefend executives looked intrigued by this proposition. My father's expression remained unreadable. And what does SecureNova gain from this arrangement, he asked. Access to Blackwell's manufacturing client base for our security solutions. A seat on TechDefend's board. And a formal partnership agreement with Blackwell Enterprises for future technological integration projects. My father leaned back in his chair, studying me with new eyes. You've thought this through. That's what CEOs do, I replied simply. After 2 hours of detailed negotiations, we had reached a tentative agreement that satisfied all parties. The lawyers were dispatched to draft the revised contracts, and the TechDefend team left to consult with their board about the new structure. As the room cleared, only my family remained. The professional veneer that had carried us through the business discussion began to crack, revealing the personal undercurrents beneath. I'd like to speak with my son privately, my father announced, looking at Brian and Aunt Eleanor. Give us the room, please. Brian hesitated but complied, giving me a nod that seemed almost respectful as he left. Aunt Eleanor followed, her expression still a mixture of shock and calculation. When the door closed behind them, my father turned to me. Your office? I led him to my private office adjacent to the boardroom. The space reflected my personal style. Modern but understated, with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a few carefully chosen art pieces. A large photograph of the original SecureNova team, just 4 of us in our first tiny office, hung prominently on one wall. My father walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline that included the Blackwell Enterprises building in the distance. Why the secrecy, Rhett? Why build all this without ever telling us? Would you have believed in me if I had told you my plans? I asked quietly. Or would you have dismissed my ideas as naive and impractical? Just as you did when I presented my cybersecurity strategy years ago. He turned to face me, his expression softening slightly. We might have invested in your company with strings attached, I countered. With control, with Brian installed as overseer to make sure I didn't mess it up. I needed to build this my way. Without the Blackwell shadow looming over every decision, my father was silent for a long moment. You've done remarkably well, he finally admitted. Better than I would have predicted. That's the point, Father. You never saw what I was capable of because you were too focused on molding me into a version of yourself or Brian. I needed to find my own path. The door opened, and Brian entered without knocking, a habit from his privileged position at Blackwell Enterprises. Sorry to interrupt, but I needed to say something. He looked directly at me. This is impressive, Rhett. Truly impressive. His acknowledgement surprised me. Thank you. Brian ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I remembered from our childhood when he was trying to express something difficult. I never wanted us to be competitors, you know. The pressure to succeed. To be the perfect Blackwell heir. It wasn't easy. Sometimes I envied your freedom. Freedom? I laughed softly. Is that what you call being told repeatedly that you don't have what it takes? At least you could chart your own course, Brian replied. I've been following a predetermined path my entire life. This glimpse of vulnerability from my always confident brother struck me. Before I could respond, Aunt Eleanor appeared at the door. Well, this has been quite the revelation, she said, her voice less sharp than usual. I suppose I owe you an apology, Rhett. It seems you had the Blackwell business acumen all along. Her apology, half-hearted as it was, represented a significant concession from a woman who rarely admitted being wrong about anything. I built SecureNova, not to prove I had Blackwell business acumen, I told her. I built it to create something valuable on my own terms. My father cleared his throat. The revised acquisition proposal you presented today is sound. But I have one additional condition before I agree to it. What condition? I asked cautiously. That Blackwell Enterprises and SecureNova formalize a broader strategic partnership beyond just the tech-defend acquisition, and that you, personally, consider taking a more active role in the future of the Blackwell corporate family. It was a significant olive branch from a man who rarely compromised. I'll consider it, I replied, on the condition that Blackwell Enterprises reviews its corporate culture and management approach. The company needs modernization in how it treats employees and evaluates talent. My father nodded slowly. Perhaps it's time for some fresh perspectives. We can discuss specifics as we move forward with this partnership. As they prepared to leave, Brian lingered behind. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you, little brother. You've built something remarkable here. The words I had once longed to hear from my family now washed over me with unexpected emotion. Thank you, I said simply. That means more than you might think. 1 month after the fateful meeting at SecureNova headquarters, the three-way partnership between Blackwell Enterprises, TechDefend, and SecureNova was formalized. The press release announced a strategic alliance leveraging the strengths of 3 industry leaders, but made no mention of the family connections behind the deal. That remained our private business. The acquisition transformed all 3 companies. TechDefend gained the financial backing it needed to scale its hardware solutions. Blackwell Enterprises entered the cybersecurity market with established products and expertise. And SecureNova gained access to a vast new client base of manufacturing companies worldwide. I was reviewing the first quarter projections for our new partnership when my phone rang. It was my mother, Catherine. Rhett, darling, I'm calling to invite you and Jessica to dinner at the house this weekend. Just family, no business associates. Your father and I would love to have you both. The invitation surprised me. Family dinners at the Blackwell mansion had always been thinly veiled business meetings or opportunities for comparison and criticism. What's the occasion? I asked cautiously. Does there need to be one? My mother sounded genuinely hurt by my suspicion. I think we have a lot of catching up to do. Don't you? Jessica encouraged me to accept. They're making an effort, Rhett. Maybe it's time to meet them halfway. That Saturday evening, Jessica and I drove through the familiar gates of the Blackwell estate. Unlike the reunion event weeks earlier, there were no other cars in the circular driveway, no caterers bustling about, no sense of performance or pretense. My mother greeted us at the door with warm embraces, leading us not to the formal dining room but to the smaller family dining area where we had rarely eaten except on the most casual occasions. My father stood as we entered, looking somewhat uncomfortable but making a visible effort. Rhett, Jessica, thank you for coming, he said, offering handshakes that felt less stiff than usual. Brian and Aunt Eleanor were already seated, both offering genuine smiles of welcome. We thought we'd keep it simple tonight, my mother explained. I cooked myself. This revelation shocked me more than perhaps it should have. In my memory, my mother had never cooked a meal in this house, always relying on the family chef for even the most basic dishes. You cooked? I couldn't hide my surprise. She nodded, looking slightly embarrassed. I've been taking classes. I realized there are many things I've missed out on by always delegating the simple pleasures in life. The meal was simple but delicious: roast chicken, fresh vegetables, and homemade bread. The conversation started awkwardly, but gradually warmed as we carefully navigated around old hurts and misunderstandings. After dessert, my father cleared his throat. I think we need to address the elephant in the room, he said. Rhett, I owe you an apology. The table fell silent. Richard Blackwell apologizing was as rare as a solar eclipse. I was wrong about you, he continued. I had a fixed idea of what success looked like, what a Blackwell should be. I tried to force you into a mold instead of seeing your unique potential. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air, powerful in their simplicity and rarity. I could have been more supportive, my mother added softly. I knew how unfairly you were being treated, but I stayed silent to keep the peace. That was my failure as your mother, and I hope you can forgive me. Brian leaned forward. I never made it easier for you. The competition between us, I fueled that. Part of me was always afraid you'd outshine me if given the chance. And look what happened. You built something extraordinary on your own. Aunt Eleanor, never one for sentimentality, added her piece. I was harsh with you, Rhett. Perhaps because you reminded me of myself at your age. Questioning traditions. Wanting to forge your own path. I chose to conform to family expectations. You had the courage I lacked. Their admissions washed over me. Healing balm on wounds I hadn't realized were still so raw. Jessica squeezed my hand under the table, offering silent support. I built SecureNova initially to prove you all wrong, I admitted. To show that I could succeed without the Blackwell name or connections. But somewhere along the way, it became about something more important. Building something I truly believed in. Something that reflected my own values and vision. And you've done that brilliantly, my father acknowledged. The question now is, where do we go from here? As a family. Not just as business partners. I don't know if we can erase the past, I said honestly. But maybe we can build something new. It will take time and effort from all of us. Jessica, who had been quietly observing, spoke up. Families are like startups in a way. They require investment, patience, clear communication, and a willingness to adapt when things aren't working. The difference is, with family, you can't just walk away when it gets tough without losing something precious. Her insight resonated around the table, drawing thoughtful nods even from Aunt Eleanor. I'd like to try, my mother said simply, to build a real family relationship, not one based on business success or appearances. In the months that followed, we took small steps toward healing. Sunday dinners became a regular occurrence, with an unspoken rule that business talk was limited to 15 minutes at the end of the meal. My father and I began a tradition of monthly one-on-one lunches, getting to know each other as individuals rather than just father and son or business associates. Brian and I discovered common ground beyond the business world, a shared interest in sailing that led to weekend outings on the bay. Even Aunt Eleanor softened, inviting Jessica and me to the theater and actually listening to our opinions and experiences. The business partnership flourished alongside our healing family relationships. SecureNova continued its explosive growth, now bolstered by the Blackwell network and resources. I maintained my independence as CEO, while accepting my father's occasional advice with new openness. 6 months after our partnership began, my father surprised me by asking me to serve as a special advisor to the Blackwell Enterprises board, not as a subordinate or employee, but as an independent voice, bringing fresh perspective to a company steeped in tradition. We need your vision, he admitted. The world is changing faster than Blackwell can adapt on its own. I accepted the role with clear boundaries and expectations on both sides. It became a bridge between our companies and our personal relationship. A symbol of new respect and cooperation. The journey from being the dismissed, underestimated son to a respected business leader and family member taught me lessons I could never have learned in business school or from any mentor. True success isn't measured by the size of your company or your bank account, but by building something that reflects your authentic self and values. Sometimes the people who believe in you the least can motivate you the most, but that motivation needs to transform from proving others wrong to proving yourself right. The hardest person to forgive is often yourself, for the years spent seeking validation from those who couldn't give it, for the bitterness that can poison even well-deserved success. And perhaps most importantly, the courage to forge your own path doesn't mean you have to walk it entirely alone. Reconciliation, when possible, can add dimensions to success that solo achievement never can. Jessica and I now lead SecureNova together as equal partners in business and life. The company continues to thrive not despite but because of its connections to Blackwell Enterprises, proof that independence and family legacy can coexist when built on mutual respect. My journey from underestimated son to successful entrepreneur taught me that true freedom comes not from escaping your past, but from transforming your relationship with it. Building my company in secret gave me the space to discover my own strength, but sharing that success with my family, despite the risk of rejection, allowed for a completeness I hadn't anticipated. Have you ever been underestimated by those closest to you? How did you respond? By fighting to prove them wrong, or by quietly building your own path? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories of transformation and growth. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need encouragement to follow their own vision, even when others don't see it yet. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the greatest success comes from the places where others least expect it.